So what actually is a coma? Just a shut down body, like a computer that's been turned off? Or is it a passage into some other world, where consciousness keeps living its own life while the body lies motionless in a hospital bed? For years, doctors believed that if a person doesn't respond, it means there's essentially no one there. But recent research has turned that idea upside down. It turns out that behind closed eyes, there can be an entire world. Thoughts, emotions, even suffering. And the most unexpected part of this story is waiting for you at the very end. Let's dig in. What is a coma? Scientifically, let's start with the basics. A coma is a state of deep suppression of consciousness in which a person doesn't respond to external stimuli, doesn't open their eyes, and doesn't follow commands. At this point, the brain switches into survival mode. It keeps basic functions running, breathing, heartbeat, but shuts down everything not critical for survival. The causes can vary: traumatic brain injury, stroke, severe infection, poisoning, oxygen deprivation. And here's what's interesting. Coma itself isn't uniform. There are lighter degrees where the brain still reacts to pain and deep ones where responses are almost or completely absent. On an EEG, the difference is very clear. In a sleeping person, the brain is literally buzzing with activity. Different sleep phases occur, the brain processes information, creates dreams. But in a deep coma, the cerebral cortex, the part of the brain responsible for thought, perception, and personality, is sharply suppressed or completely silent. This is a protective reaction of the body to critical damage, but that protection comes at a cost: the loss of the very thing that makes us who we are. Hidden consciousness, the major discovery of recent years. And this is where things get really interesting. For a long time, it was believed that if a patient shows no response, then there's no consciousness present. But a group of neurologists decided to test that assumption using technology. Scientists examined 353 adult patients who were in a coma and showed no outward signs of consciousness at all. They were connected to an EEG and asked, purely mentally, to imagine playing tennis or walking through a familiar room in their own home. And here's the result that shocked even the researchers themselves. In roughly 1 out of every 4 patients, the brain responded clearly to that request, activating exactly the regions that should switch on if the person were conscious. The body didn't move. The eyes didn't open. Not a single outward sign pointed to the presence of a mind. Yet in that moment, the brain was working, listening, understanding, and responding. This phenomenon was named cognitive motor dissociation, or hidden consciousness, and this was the first study of this scale to prove that some patients considered completely switched off are in fact still here with us. Their body simply can't physically show it. The story of Kate Bainbridge. To understand what this really means, it's worth hearing one real story. A school teacher named Kate Bainbridge fell into a coma due to severe brain inflammation. Doctors and family were certain she was completely disconnected from reality, feeling and understanding nothing. But after several months, Kate regained consciousness, and what she described stunned the medical staff. It turned out that the entire time she lay motionless, she was aware of everything happening around her. She heard the doctors talking, felt being touched, understood she was in a hospital. The most frightening part, she tried to let people know she was there. She tried to cry to get attention. But doctors, seeing the tears, interpreted them simply as a reflex reaction of the body, not a conscious signal. She was in complete despair, trapped inside her own body, screaming inside and completely mute on the outside. This story became the basis for a BBC documentary called Coma, which explores scientists' attempts to establish communication with people caught in this state between presence and absence. Hearing and response to loved ones. What about hearing? Can a person in a coma actually hear the voices of family members, as doctors often advise relatives? Talk to them, it might help. It turns out, yes, and science backs this up. Researchers at the University of Lyon ran an experiment. Coma patients were played recordings of loved ones' voices, and separately, unfamiliar background sounds, and the brain responded differently. Activity in the auditory cortex differed when hearing a familiar voice compared to random noise. This means that even when consciousness appears to be shut down, the part of the brain responsible for recognizing sound may keep working. This might explain why many patients who emerge from a coma remember fragments of phrases or the tone of voices that were near them. Pain and pain relief. Another important question: does a person in a coma feel pain? For a long time, it was assumed that if there's no consciousness, there's no pain either. But modern medicine takes a far more cautious approach. The fact is, some responses to painful stimuli, like a hand moving or a change in heart rate, can occur even without involvement of the brain's higher cortical regions, just at the level of the brainstem. This doesn't prove the person consciously feels pain, but it doesn't rule out that possibility either. That's exactly why coma patients today are always given pain medication, even if they show no outward reaction. And new methods, such as machine learning analysis of EEG data, help detect hidden brainwave patterns that may indicate a pain response. Technology now allows us to see what used to be simply impossible to notice with the naked eye. Dreams and hallucinations. There's also evidence that some coma patients genuinely experience something like dreams or hallucinations. In 15 to 20% of people with no outward signs of consciousness, hidden cognitive processes are detected, meaning the brain isn't just existing in that moment, but actively processing something. People who survive a coma and emerge from it often describe fragmented, disjointed memories, images, sensations, sometimes entire sequences resembling a dream. The nature of these memories depends on the depth of the coma, its cause, and the individual characteristics of each person's brain. Transition to personal accounts and esoteric experiences. And now, what goes beyond instruments and EEGs. What the people who lived through a coma themselves describe, based only on their personal experience. Some describe a state where they seem to observe their own body and the doctors from the outside, as if their consciousness were floating somewhere nearby, outside the body. This echoes that same out-of-body phenomenon that science is also trying to explain. Others describe encounters with relatives who had already passed away, a long tunnel, and a bright light at the end. Classic imagery that often appears in accounts of people who lived through near-death states. And there are even stranger cases, where a person, upon waking from a coma, knows exact details of conversations that took place in the room, even though by all medical accounts, they shouldn't have been able to perceive them at that time. Across different cultures and spiritual traditions, coma has long been seen as an in-between state, as if the soul temporarily leaves the body, but isn't yet ready to depart for good. Science, of course, explains this differently, through the activity of specific brain regions, residual processing, the brain working through information already stored in memory. But the very fact that such different explanations, the scientific and the spiritual, are trying to describe the same experience is remarkable in itself. The most unexpected fact, the payoff. And now, as promised, the most unexpected part. Remember that experiment asking patients to imagine playing tennis? In some patients who, by every outward measure, were indistinguishable from someone completely switched off, no movement, no reaction at all for months, the EEG recorded a completely clear brain response. The same kind of response you'd see in a fully conscious, healthy person. This means that somewhere inside, behind a motionless face and closed eyes, the person could have been present the entire time, hearing the doctor's voices, feeling their family's touch, understanding what was happening around them. Their body simply couldn't physically show it. So what is a coma, really? An emptiness where the person is truly no longer there? Or a locked door behind which consciousness continues living a full life, simply unable to reach the outside world? Science still doesn't have a definitive answer. But one thing can already be said for certain. The line between presence and absence of consciousness is far thinner and more complex than we've been taught to think. So, do you think a person in a coma can hear us? Let us know in the comments. Let's discuss it together.